one of my very first vocal empowerment clients. And we were just diving in, and she calls me and she's like, Jenny, I can't work with you anymore. The first class is always on fear. That's why they're not speaking their truth in their relationships. That's why they're not pursuing the career that would be most fulfilling. That's why they're not posting on social media during a genocide because they don't know what to fucking say. And I better learn how to obey and get my own shit out of the way so that at least I can attempt to be in service to a world that's absolutely gone mad.
Okay, if I meditate this much every day and do yoga this many times this week and do breath work this many times, then I'll know.
I got a little beef with like the self-help industry.
I like beef. Welcome back, everybody, to the Culmination Project. This is episode number 5, and I have my good friend and local legend, Jenny Jahlee, here on the show. She is a musician, a body worker, energy worker, and also runs retreats and just does a lot of community involvement sort of things. She's quite the Jill of all trades and very good at many of them. So, Jenny, how's it going?
Only
I mean,
many?
pretty much all of them.
I'm not
I
good at
mean, you're
all of
like
them?
at least proficient at, all of them.
I'm good
Yeah.
enough at all of them. Yeah.
You're an expert at a few, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. To be honest, this is all
I gotta,
about
I gotta
honesty
watch what I
anyways,
say,
right?
apparently. Just messing with you. Yeah, for sure. So, this show, is very much about how spirit guides an individual in their lives, kind of how that function happens through a human being, from moment to moment, day to day, and also how it's sort of informed where you are right now and how that's hit you in the past in ways that have created the trajectory of your life currently, and kind of some of those pivotal moments we like to talk about when I have guests on, of those kind of moments where you're just like, okay, I'm at a fork in the road here, and I need to make this move because my intuition is calling that. That's what wants to happen through me, and if I don't, it's going to be painful, basically, or it's not going to be aligned with who I know I could be. So maybe just give us a rundown about yourself, what it is you do on a day-to-day basis, how you work with people, and kind of how spirit has informed from where you were to where you are now. And that's a mouthful. It's kind of a lot.
All kinds
Just to
of
let it
things.
flow out.
Whew, how much
Yeah.
time we got? Let's go.
Stream of consciousness.
Yeah. My name is Jenny. You already figured that out. That's awesome. Local legend, also very true. So one of the biggest thing that's like underpinned my whole life has been this fiery desire to express as a way of staying sane in a crazy world. And I just actually went home to visit my dad, and he gave me my little freshman year of high school songbook. And I'm like, I don't want that. And I took a look at it and was like, oh, Jesus. Like, it's so bad. It's just all about boys and my brother. And yet, like, that that piece of expressing and poeting and making creativity out of what I'm feeling has always been there. And so that's kind of been the biggest, most beautiful way that I've been guided throughout my life is through song and poem and this artistic expression through using the human body as an instrument, using the human mind as an instrument. And then and I've played music forever. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, a friend of mine was like, hey, I want vocal lessons. And I was like, I'm completely self-taught on guitar and on voice, and was like, fuck it, let's do that. There's got to be something useful that can come through. And what ended up happening in that session was we both cried. She like went through some childhood trauma memory about like her voice and how her voice was so woven in with her identity, and how singing is, it's like confronting her own sense of identity. And it was just this crazy experience of like, oh, this has nothing to do with singing. This has so much more to do with how we view ourselves, how we understand ourselves, and what kind of bravery is required to share that, with the outside world. And so then years after that and up until now, I did a lot of vocal empowerment coaching, and then I still wanted to take that a few layers deeper, and have landed in my truth training online course, which is like the juiciest, grittiest place that I can land that I'm qualified to
Yeah.
coach in some type of experiential and confident way. And it's been amazing. And it's leaning into my own unconscious propensity for
Yeah.
intensity
I like
because
that.
it's hot, it's spicy, it's incredibly inconvenient, and it's to me like the medicine of our times. You know, like you're mentioning, I do a lot of community events. I host a like 150, 200 person women's gathering annually, and I do a lot of breathwork circles. I do breathwork facilitation, and I do all these things where I'm like trying to gather people together so that we can feel the beauty of togetherness and like the revillaging. But once again, like even in the revillaging concept, it's so much less sexy
Yeah.
than it sounds. It's like incredibly hard and confronting with the way that a lot of these old patterns have come up. And so that's kind of become my life's work and a bit of my obsession and my mania. And then as the entrepreneur plight goes, it's hard to separate oneself from your work.
Yeah.
So then it's also just become my own interpersonal uh, trial by fire,
Yeah.
which is awesome because I feel like I get to walk my talk in that way. And then, kind of like we were talking about before we hit record, I'm tired. Sometimes it just makes me so
Yeah.
tired. and
Definitely.
and so underneath all of that, there's a call for a lot more joy and comedy in the healing process, in the truth process, in the expression process. Because whoa, if it gets too serious, that's like its own form of constriction and crazy.
Yeah. It's like keeping in mind the cosmic joke or like big view, right? Zoomed out
Hmm.
view simultaneously. There's a
Yeah,
quote by Alan Watts that I love. It's something to the tune of like, if you can hold the big view of like nothing matters and the chunked down minute view of like everything matters simultaneously,
yeah,
then you'll very
yeah,
rarely, like your life will churn between those two simultaneously, and you'll never be fully hooked into
totally.
one or the other. You can kind of zoom in and zoom out at will, right? Um,
Well, and that's really kind of one of the biggest pieces in, let's say, truth work or even breath work. You know, these practices that are designed to expand us to be able to, I want to say hold the paradox, but it's not even so much of a holding as like a reconciling or a surrendering to the paradox.
mhm.
And and that's a strange dance in our times where there's increasingly more and more reasons to try to control and to have predictability and to be something that you see with your mind's eye instead of like that paradox that's huge. It's fucking
Yeah. Well, the
huge.
mind doesn't like paradoxes, right? The mind is it's linear. So it's like,
Yeah.
is it this or is it that? Is it good or is it bad? Or is it positive or is it negative? Is it up or is it down?
Mm,
It's really challenging for our minds to comprehend. Well, it's both, and
yeah.
then it's also the space between. It's all of it,
So then
right?
what part of the self, let's say the
Mhm.
mind, right? Like everything's here for a reason, let's
Sure.
hope.
Yeah. I mean,
And
or it
let's say the
wouldn't be.
mind doesn't function well.
Yeah.
Totally. Because I guess what I want to ask you is like, what part of the self, of the human experience, is best equipped to be in right relationship with the actual paradox of reality, if it's not the
Yeah.
mind?
So I think there's this aspect of being that is its own intelligence, that it's outside of mind, like because mind, it's like by the very nature we say our mind, my mind, that implies that I see my mind, that it's something that's within
Hmm.
me. So it's like coming back to like what is the me then that sees that, and getting in touch with that. And I
Yeah.
think like we were speaking to before we hit record, it's very much it's removing those old emotional patterns. And as I've found personally, as I removed those and I'm continuing to remove them, and this is something that's really been accelerating for me a lot lately, after years of trial and error, to be honest. But uh, as those are removed, there's this other kind of movement that comes online that's more of like an inner current, and that's what I speak to about like spirit moving you, like the intuition. It's like always trying to get our
Mm-hmm.
attention, but it's like the mind wants to go, nope. Mind's like,
Mm-hmm.
nope. I have to know for sure. It needs to be A plus B equals C, and here's my projection of tomorrow, or here's what I know from the past. So it's just this computer that's constantly like trying to
Mm-hmm.
paste these old projections or potentialities of projection, which are really just based on old projection, right, onto now.
Mm-hmm.
And so to answer your question more succinctly, it's like what's most equipped, at least from my view, to handle the paradox is the thing that is the very nature of the paradox. So like it is the paradox, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that sense of that space of being that just like it's just kind of like it gives you the nudges, right? It's like kind of move this way, move this, but it doesn't ever tell you. It's never like here's why
Yeah.
specifically. It might give you some insight sometimes, but it's more like just trust me, follow me. Let's see what happens. Let it unfold.
So it almost sounds like there's like you're speaking to the part of ourselves that's not that much of ourselves. Like I'm almost hearing that the that nature of being that is the paradox, that we are that also, but there's part of ourselves that is kind of maybe designed to not
Yeah.
be in right relationship with the paradox at all times. And so to call on, I don't know, like almost like the spirit self or like the self that's just larger
Yeah.
than the ego or the
It's big self,
identity.
self with a capital S versus small self.
Yeah.
Meaning like that
Yeah.
because the ego paradigm, its function is to for survival. That's what it does.
Hmm.
It's like a planner. It's like we have to get food today. We have to make sure we don't die. We have to right. But like we're living in a society that's not as big of an issue as it used to be. So therefore, now it's like, well, the
Hmm.
mind's like, well, what do I do? Well, let's make psychological fear and play psychological games inside instead of like running from the lion
Those are my
or
favorite.
trying to find food or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, there is. Go
Uh,
ahead.
can we pause for a
Sure. What's
second?
up?
Your screen is black. I can't see
It's okay.
you,
It'll still record.
but I don't know if that's normal. Okay, great.
It'll probably pop back on. It's fine. So yeah,
Okay,
as long as we can
great.
still hear you. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Cool.
You're back now. Okay,
That's all
sorry.
good. Okay. So, yeah. That being said, tell me. I'd like to hear a little bit about, well, truth training, but the other vocal empowerment. So, what? So we've spoken about this in the past, but for the audience, what is vocal empowerment, and what is it designed to? What are the results designed to do for a human being, like on a day to day level? Like, how does it affect once they go through it, and it's uncovered some things. How does it
Hmm.
generally affect people in their day to day life?
I mean, vocal empowerment is now truth training. They're kind of one and the
Okay.
same. Truth training just scratched the itch of me wanting to go even
Yeah.
deeper into that desire. But at the vocal empowerment stage, it was a little bit more naive with understanding that expression and sharing our voice with the world and learning how to sing and just like be who you really are is one of the greatest forms of self
Mm-hmm.
healing. And that's a very generalized overstatement, but it helps a lot and it definitely brings joy. And in the years of doing this, the first class is always on fear because that's why people are not blank, 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 blank. That's why they're not speaking their truth in their relationships. That's why they're not pursuing the career that would be most fulfilling. That's why they're not speaking up to the person who's abusing them. That's why they're not posting on social media during a genocide because they don't know what to fucking say. Because it's the fear function like you just
Mm-hmm.
spoke to. And 10 out of 10 people, no, 9.5 out of 10 people, there's those outliers, right? That are like, I'm afraid of aliens. And you're like, oh, okay, well, this class ain't
Good
gonna
luck
help you
with
with that.
that.
But good, yeah, like they're here. I saw some stuff on the internet
Yeah.
this morning. Let's talk about it. Um,
I believe you.
is
I've seen
that
them.
nine
Yeah, so
point
I literally
yeah.
have seen them. But we can talk about that later. No, no,
Well,
no, no, no,
we can
no,
go
no. Let's
there.
not.
It's
This is
it's
about true.
here.
This is
What's your alien
just.
truth?
It's too long of a story. Maybe I'll tell you at some point, or maybe.
You have to do a solo cast on
Anyways,
that
yeah.
one.
You'll continue to with the truth training.
So the rest, so you're that other like half a percent, but the 9.5 out of 10 folks, when I'm like, yo, what are you afraid of? All of those fears have to do with other
Mm,
people. I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid of being unloved. I'm afraid of being looked at like I'm crazy. I'm afraid of my marriage failing. I'm afraid, and all those fears are totally justifiable. And I try to help people come into like, there's the concept, the fear idea, there's the fear as a emotion, and then there's the fear in the animal body as the soma, as the somatic experience of like the contraction or the expansion or the running or the anxiety, right? But outside of all that, what I started tracking was like, oh, we're just afraid of each other. That's it. So, what kind of reality is this that we're living in where people's number one fear is other people's thoughts and other people's opinions? And that's why so much of this work is foundationally relational
mm.
healing. Because if and it's kind of like who started it, like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own
Chicken or
tail.
the egg?
Because if everyone's walking around in this, totally the
Yeah.
chegg, that's what it is. But let's say everyone's walking
Mhm.
around in some grade, except for there are those people that are not, but broadly, people are walking around with some fear underlying, smoldering, simmering below the surface of what do they think about me? If I say this, am I going to be okay? If this happens, da
Yeah.
da da da, am I going to be okay in the world of
Yeah. This
mankind?
applies to about ninety nine
And
point nine
so,
nine 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 percent of people. Yeah.
totally, yeah. And on one hand, it's excruciatingly heartbreaking. It's like, oh my God, like what happened? You talk about, surrendering to like to feeling things, and you come and you sit and you're just like, how did, how the fuck did we get here? Like. And you see it with like the pervading wars against mankind and like dysfunction. It's almost like is man meant to fear and hate itself forever? And like that's a tangent that we shan't go
Yeah.
into. But underneath all of that, what I've learned is that it doesn't have to be entirely true. And so through self-expression, through taking personal responsibility for one's own feelings, through dismantling a little the projection field and the assumptions of how people are going to think if you sing your soul song or you start your career or you tell your partner that you want a different kind of relationship, that there's a personal responsibility that can be activated with a lot of compassion that can change that story just enough to where people can start to actually feel safe being who they really are, feeling how they really feel, and expressing life force energy in the world the way that they were actually meant to. And, self expression, personal expression is awesome, but it's also like get you out of the way so that life can express itself through you. Kind of like to your question, right? Of like, how does spirit guide you? How does spirit move you? Well, it fucking can't. If there's
Mm-hmm.
such a rigidity that that it's me that like I want to do truth training. It's like do I want to do truth training, or is this the way that the one is moving through my unique little tiny human experience this lifetime, and I better learn how to obey and get my own shit out of the way so that at least I can attempt to be in service to a world that's absolutely gone
Mm-hmm.
mad. And so vocal empowerment and truth training and like liberated expression isn't about like I have a funny story. I had to buy a new computer recently, and there's this very comical man at the computer store. He's very dominating. And he's like, "Oh, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm teaching a class. I got to get a computer that works soon." And he's like, "Oh, yeah. What's it all about?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's called truth training. It's kind of like a vocal empowerment thing." And he's like, "Oh, I'm vocally empowered? I was like, oh, is that so? And it's a lot of people think that it's this like learn how to speak confidently to your boss and da da da, and that's all part of it.
Yeah.
And that's almost like the selling
Yeah.
point, right? Because those are the things that tangibly make
That's
our lives easier. Like you're
yeah.
asking, like,
That,
how does this
that's the
look?
result,
But then
right?
underneath that,
Yeah.
that's the
Right.
result. But the why and almost the how is much more mystical. It's much more of a path of surrender. It's inviting in this belief that not everybody does, in fact, believe that there is a reason why I was born. There's a reason to my unique soul expression. There's a reason that Jenny is different than Cole. And if I just try to homogenize myself and be a cog in the machine of late stage capitalism and do what I'm told and get the money and get the marriage and get the babies and da da da, if that's very authentic for you, fuck
But then
yeah.
find out,
But for those of us that
that you're not happy
feel,
afterwards. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
I'm just
Toll, that is,
said to add that in
that's the
there.
biggest, that's like the biggest
Yeah.
heartbreak. One of my very first vocal empowerment clients, she we had a couple sessions together, and I'm fierce and I'm fun. And I feel like I can't have one without the other or it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Just who
Paradox.
you are.
And we were just diving in, and she calls me and she's like, "Jenny, I can't work with you anymore." She's like, "I have 4 kids. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and if I keep doing this work with you, I'm going to leave my marriage. I don't know what's going to happen to my kids. I don't know how to have a job in the workforce. And like this is not I can't do this right now." And I was like, "You know what? That is you expressing your power in your voice. Like, that's perfect. That's okay. To be like, my truth is in this moment, I can't just willy nilly Instagram influencer express myself in the ways. Like, there's a deep humility and responsibility that comes with it when you get really honest of like, well, this is what I want, but then also reconciling where am I at in my life right now? Am I resourced enough to make some of and implement some of these changes that I'm being inspired to activate in my life? And I think you and I might both agree that in the the internet world, but in the self-help world, in the coaching world, whatever this crazy world that I'm sometimes embarrassed to be a part of, but it's okay. There's so much inspiration to like change that's not considering people's the context of
Mm-hmm.
their lives because yes, let's say you built this entire life around you that's not actually true. You wake up to that and then that's its own like potentially traumatizing awakening,
Yeah.
and then you just run away and leave it all without the resources, without the tools, without the skills, without the community, without the support. That would be a bad decision,
Right.
and so it's
Would
like
be
there's
painful.
this
That's for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and like honestly, I've seen it be almost traumatizing for people because there's this I've spent 40 years not knowing who I am and now I finally do and I just have to eat the whole cake right now.
Yeah.
And it's like you're gonna get
Yeah.
sick. You're gonna get real sick. Uh
For sure.
and I empathize with that impulse to like to feel like you're missing out on your own life. But then I think that's, especially with this last round of truth training that I'm doing, that's like the piece that's coming in the strongest is how to invoke and embody truth in a way that honors your capacity, that honors where you're at, that gives time for actual skill building so you don't burn yourself in the process. And then what happens if you run outside and you get hit by lightning and then you're damaged? You run back inside,
Right.
right? So, like, the change can't actually take root if it's not uh, done with respect to your state
Yeah.
or to where you're at, how far off the path you've actually gotten.
Right.
Like, do you have enough snacks to get you back on the other path, or are you going to die on the
Right.
way?
Well, and a lot of this is, people probably come to truth training or some modality similar to it. Yeah, at least this has been my experience, and from what I've seen, almost universally, is like through pain. So they're just tired. They're just like
Yeah,
tired. They're like, I don't want to feel this way anymore. I can't do it anymore. It's either
totally.
this or I go down a further hole, and then that leads to despair and suicidal tendencies, and wherever the darkness really leads. And so it
Yeah,
takes
it's like the giving the power
yeah,
away.
so it takes oftentimes this sort of readiness to jump into something like this. And
Mhm.
from what I'm hearing, it sounds like truth training is essentially, like you mentioned, here's the sales pitch for truth training, which is like, yeah, you'll be better off, in your job, and you'll be able to communicate with your partner better, and da 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 da. Which those are all great things, but they're byproducts of really just getting in touch with
Mhm.
the
Yeah, yeah,
deeper
yeah.
spiritual self, which is the impetus to join something like truth training. Like that's the little calling in your mind, being like,
Yeah.
hey, this is something I need to do. I need to face myself. I need to like look and see what's actually going on here inside, right? And you had mentioned, we're
Yeah.
walking around afraid of each other, right? But the interesting
Yeah.
thing, there's like another layer to that I see, which is, um, and I'm sure you've seen this too, which is like none of that's actually, all of it's going on in our own head. Like all those, like, what is this person
Mhm.
thinking about me? How's this person going to react?
It's the
It's
conditioning.
literally none of that's actually happening. It might be. There may be a 1% of what we think is actually happening, or somebody's
Mhm.
actually thinking. But in reality, like we don't, even that 1%, we don't know that. We just think it's in our head. It's in our head.
Yeah.
So like beginning to see that clearly, and through what you're doing, it sounds like that's you're showing people how to look at that, and just the looking at it and becoming aware of it starts to poke a hole in this projection, in this outward, like I have to go
Yeah.
fix the world, or I have to fix the people around me, or I have to,
Yeah.
it's like, no, you got to, it's like put some shoes on and walk around the world instead of bubble wrapping the whole damn thing, right? So that personal
It's very
responsibility piece
real.
of just noticing that it's all going on up here, and then
Yeah, it's like we make these little
yeah,
prisons for
yeah,
ourselves and then blame other people for it, which I think is part of the fundamental fear of each other. Or like I've even said that I think our culture, because I only know the one here in the
mm-hmm.
West, is in a root chakra crisis where we're not connected to each other, we're not connected to earth, we have a world of so much convenience, we're not connected to that which even gives us life. And and there's consequences to having a really safe, comfortable, convenient life, which is a lot of existential crisis, if I'm just going to name it.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's
going back to
disconnection,
something that you mentioned,
but it's like
yeah,
solitude, and like people kind of just clamming up in their own little shell. Also, if you're not careful.
totally.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
But there's the symptomatic reality, right? Because as my work has transitioned from like singing lessons to vocal empowerment to truth training, it's like being able to sing confidently and comfortably is a symptom of someone who's comfortable in their own skin and who's comfortable being authentic, not, because everybody wants to sing good.
Right.
Nobody wants to
Right.
sing like
Yeah.
them. And
Right.
it's like people would come to me and they're like, "Can you teach me how to sing good?" I was like, "No, but I can teach you how to sound like you.
Yeah.
And if you sound cool, then great. If you sound like Neil Young, then you sound like,
Yeah.
I don't think Neil Young had a good voice at all, but he was just
Yeah. He was
he was just
himself.
himself."
Yes. And that's why people are
Yeah.
attracted to him.
And that works. Yeah, because there's nothing that my ears hate more than hearing somebody trying too hard. And I know it from experience. I made my first album in 2018 and I cannot fucking listen to it. I can't listen to it because I sang great, but like every song I can hear me overdoing it. I'm trying to be something.
Mm.
And my favorite, when I sing, and my favorite voice is the voice in me that's like relaxed. And I can do all this. I can do so much with my voice. But whenever I get into a recording studio, I get all weird and nervous and I try really
This better
hard.
be good.
And then it's recorded like that
People are
forever.
watching. People are looking. Oh my god. Well, and isn't it
Yeah, it's so
interesting too? Because
real.
like I noticed this with myself, and I'm sure, and it literally, I don't think I know a coach or somebody in this sort of space, the spiritual, whatever you want to call this sort of
Spiritual
I call it,
whatever
it's like
feels
it's
like a
like the
good name.
unfoldment space. It's like
Ah,
helping others to like dive inward and see what's blocking them from being themselves,
yeah.
essentially. And so
Hmm.
often I found with myself, and it sounds like you do this as well, which is I'm this is for other people because it's like for me it's like this stuff, this is why I'm doing this podcast. So like it needs to come out. This is just something that calls me, but
Hmm.
it's for me just as much as it's for everybody watching. It's
Hmm.
because it's like I want to,
Oh yeah, we're always our first
yeah.
client.
I want to embody this shit.
We're our number one
Like I want this
student.
to be like I want this
Yeah.
to become the information to become me, right? And I want to continue
Uh-huh.
to release these patterns. And so the best way to do that, it's like the best way to do it is to teach it in some form. That doesn't mean you have to be a
Uh-huh.
formal coach or anything, but like even just recording a podcast or like writing or having conversations with friends about it, like that will begin to like that signals to life, to spirit, the universe, that like, hey, I'm serious
Hmm.
about this. This is a rabbit hole I want
Yeah.
to go down, and I want to figure out who the fuck I am. Underneath all this conditioning, underneath all the programming that has been shoved down my throat
Yeah.
for my entire life. And that's what it's
Yes.
all about. Whether you literally all the fundamental, like what I would call true, authentic modalities and techniques, that's what they all point towards. Every one of them, doesn't matter what you call them. That's what they're all
Yeah.
trying. That's what they're all attempting to do. So
Well, so check this. I got a little beef with like the self-help industry.
yeah, let's hear it.
One, because it's an
I
industry
like I
that
like
that
beef
preys on
ribeye.
weak people. I got fucking beef. Ugh, I got a T-bone. Um, so the way that I've understood, and this is once again, nothing's real. It's just my opinion. It's just like what I've learned, right? So that's what's coming through me.
Yeah.
But Carolyn Meese, she has a book called The Anatomy of Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fundamental to my work. And I could go on and on about the book, but the throat chakra to her is where the personal will is surrendered to the divine will. And I think about like the throat being the bridge between, from here down, it's all my body, it's all me. And from the mind is where things start to like move out. Like, is this my thought? Is this, we're getting
Right.
a lot of other
Conceptual.
information floating around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like where the personal surrenders to the more than the self, right? And we kind of mentioned that in different ways earlier. But she speaks to authority. And Bill Plotkin kind of talks about this in his Soulcraft work, um, of the uninitiated adult versus the initiated adult is, how do I say this? Like one of the traps that I see in the self-help industry is if and when someone actually does understand the reality of taking their power back from all these projection fields, from the blame, from all the ways that we give our power away to you tell me this, da 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 da. And personal empowerment, lo and behold, feels awesome. It feels so good and it's amazing. And it's oftentimes confused as the end of the road. Now that you are empowered, there's nothing left to do. And
Yeah.
so, what Carolyn Meese has taught me is that that is the uninitiated adult. If you think that being personally empowered is it, you are a self centered son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And that the way that authority moves, if you are of the spiritual unfoldment variety, that when you're born, when you're a baby, there's tribal authority, right? Your family, your community, all of the conditioning of your culture. That's what you're being told. That's what the program is. There's tribal authority. And then what needs to be initiated, especially in cultures that have more rites of passage than ours, there is the personal authority that is developed and cultivated and fed and nurtured in the individual so that they have a sense of personal authority in their life. And this is where I see our culture is like, there's this illusion of personal authority that's actually like tribal authority,
Mm-hmm.
and they think that they're in their power, but they're still giving their power away and like, oh, what are they doing, or what are they thinking, oh, I think that too, and da, da, da. Like it's kind of muddy.
Yeah. It's like,
But then but then ideally it graduates to the third stage, which is divine authority.
mm-hmm.
And the way that I've understood this is that, let's say religion is a good example of completely missing the middle step. There's tribal authority and then there's divine authority, and like there's no personal authority allowed, at
Mm-hmm.
least in like the little bit I was fortunate enough to not grow up with any religion, but there's not a lot of personal empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens if we surrender our will to divine will without actually knowing what the fuck our will is? That's a shitty gift. It's like I'm just going to walk outside and just find a little twig that I didn't work hard for, that I didn't blood, sweat, tear, cry over, and then be like, hey, God, I got you a stick. That's like, it's not a good gift. It's not a good
It's
offering.
an insult.
And so it's an insult, right? And so there's two things that I see happen the most is either like the personal empowerment, people get stuck there because it feels so good and then they don't want to surrender to divine will, or people don't ever actually get to the personal empowerment stage and they're just moving from my community has authority to God has authority, and they're not able to give their hard-earned personal will and power to the divine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's very much so. If you continue reading the book, Letting Go, the David Hawkins
Mm-hmm.
book, those are the levels he talks about. So he talks about a little bit
Aha.
more like layered. So, and there's
Yeah.
also what's called a values. This is the values test. That's not his, but there's another. I can't remember the guy's name, but he talks about like levels of human value. And basically, what you're describing here is, first people start out, they're not empowered. They're very much in survival mode. Like as kids, we have to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
We belong to the authority of our parents and the church and whatever
Yeah,
the
the tribal.
communities are.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one level, right? And then as you move beyond that, then it becomes I'm empowered. I have personal authority. Then it's like the me against the world thing, which feels
Yeah.
better than I have little or no
It's
power. And
exciting.
yeah, it feels like, okay, finally I broke away from this herd part of the mentality, but now it's just me and I'm like, I'm the one, right? And then so there's a fear there
Mm-hmm.
naturally to let go into this kind of bigger intuitional kind of flow will, because you just
Oh, right, because it was so hard to get
right,
that
right.
that you don't want to lose it, kind
Right,
of a thing.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
Because
Uh-huh.
it's like okay, well, if I let go, then I'm back to having no power. But really, that's where the
Uh-huh.
real power is. Because when you let go of the
Yeah.
mind and you start trusting that greater, because it's the mind that's like it's me against the world. I'm going to go achieve. I'm going to go solve. I'm going to go do right, which is very very masculine. Once you let go
Mm-hmm.
into that more sense of flow, which is more of a feminine movement, it could show up as masculine too once you're in it, like for sure. But it's like it's not bound by anything. It's not. It has no. There's no
Mm-hmm.
rules within it. It's just here's the movement. Here's where I want you to go, and you begin to trust because as you trust more and more, this has been my experience. As I trust more and more, things just work out perfectly. I meet the right person, the right ideas come, the right things fall into place. It just like boom, boom. It's like living. You live in synchronicity. Essentially, is like it's like a
Mm-hmm.
whole paradigm shift.
Yeah.
But the mind is afraid of that because the very definition of the mind and the ego is like control. I want control, and
Yeah.
I don't want to relinquish control because then I might go back to having to like scrounge for bare bone survival in or like
What are you gonna
relinquish
say?
my like will to a tribe or all these idiots who think they know what they're talking about, right? And that's where
Yeah.
like 90% of the world is living is either in the me against the world or below that, right?
Yeah.
But the true power comes when
You
you can literally like it's like that's the thing is like when you hear these saints say like I don't do any of this, like God does it, it's God's will or it's spirit's will, like because they're living in that and
mm-hmm.
they're just the vehicle, their body and their mind becomes a vehicle to produce what you talked about earlier, which is like that divine who you were born to be. And that's
Yeah.
what divine will is constantly trying to get us to do, is to sign up for something like
Yeah.
truth training so that we could discover that. So like literally so we can
Yeah.
like or whatever you're called to like remove the personal will. It's really a dissolving of the personal will once you're at that point. And then that's when this other thing
Yeah.
comes online. And one more piece to this I notice is like there's oftentimes this sort of gap. And I talked to this with my friend, or talked about this with my friend Yesenia 2 podcasts ago. There's this sort of gap when you start to let go of the personal will, and the new, like the divine intuitive will that hasn't fully come online yet. And there's this sort of like dryness, sort of like neutrality that's like
Mm.
kind of boring and kind of just like lacks flavor almost. And so there's a propensity for the personal will to come in and be like, see, I told you it's no good over here. Listen
Uh-huh.
to me.
Yeah.
Let me take authority again. And so yeah, it's one that there's this kind of these
That pattern
stages,
shows up all over the
right?
place. I mean, I think one thing that comes up as you're sharing is in my work of nervous system regulation, because I'm always needing
Yeah,
that. Let's be
breath
real.
work. That's a
Um,
good one for it.
breath
Yeah.
work and breath work's exciting, but I took this course where it was like a 6 week course of nervous system regulation through somatic experiencing. And he's like, no caffeine, take some of these herbs, and one of his things was he's like, you're gonna yawn throughout the day if you don't drink caffeine. That doesn't mean you're tired. It means that you're just regulating yourself. And he's like, we've gotten so used to everybody running around on a little bit of caffeine crack all the time, dopamine or cortisol, and we think that that's the norm, but the norm is actually down here, and it's slower, and we don't get as much done in the day, and it's like maybe more boring,
Right.
right? And so I'm almost like feeling that pattern when one enters this agreement to surrender their will to the divine will, then maybe it's just less exciting. And you know what? I like it exciting.
Yeah.
Like, what do
Well,
we do in that?
I my
It is
experience
exciting. It is
is it's
exciting in its own
way
way.
more exciting. Like it's like and
It's edgy.
it's highly leveraged when you're in
Yeah.
the when you're moving with like that divine will, you know. And
Yeah.
when you're in it, it's like this is why awakening experiences are so amazing, but also like kind of fucked up too, because like if you once you have them and they aren't integrated usually in the beginning, because then it gets taken away, then you're back in ego land,
Yeah.
and you're like, I was just living in this flow state, everything was working out perfectly, like everything was slow moving, and now I'm back in like this kind of hardened conceptual world where I have to like make shit
Yeah.
happen, right? And like I've been through that, man, and it's still it still like snags me sometimes, you know, like the personal will does not like to die. It can take quite the blast of awareness
Yeah.
and like and still, you know, survive. It's like a cockroach. I think we talked about this over at dinner. Yeah. It's very resilient.
Well, something that comes up that I feel quite honestly in myself from time to time, and in a lot of other people too, is what am I surrendering to? Is just a very foundational what the hell is God? What is creator? What is Tankashala? What is the Almighty? What is the one consciousness? What is the Christ nature? What is the one that we are all an infinite form of? And I think, yeah, the logical, rational human mind thing is like, I make offerings all the time, but I know with those offerings that they're going to the river or they're going to the land, or I make an offering to a kin, a friend, and I've done elaborate rituals around offerings. And what I've noticed is that if there's not that it has to be like, oh, I've received the letter. Oh, this is what God is. Okay, now that I know, I can make my offerings.
Right.
Um, but we're never going to get that clarity. But I noticed in so many people that, like even last night, I was having a hard time with my health. I mean, my partner laying in bed and I'm praying, and part of my prayer was like, God, I can't feel you. I can't feel you right now. And that gets to be honest, but I'm still
Mm,
praying. One of my definitions for God is just the field of listening and responding.
yes.
That it's just this, but there's 10,000 names and faces for God, and that's part of the irony,
And none
right?
of them
And
are true.
I think we're exactly. And so, but I see that can be the hardest step to take into the unknown, into the mystery, into the void,
Mhm.
into the shadow, into the dark night where there's no light, there's no knowing, because it can't be trusted if it can't be known.
Right. Well, you just said it. Like how it's like the mind wants to know. Okay, well, I'm interested in this. So how do I do it? How?
Sounds great. Sign me up.
How? How? How do I do it? It's always an outward how. Maybe if I just, and this is
Yeah,
like people do this with techniques too. They're like, okay, if I meditate this much every day and do yoga this many times this week and do breath work this many times, you know what I mean? Like then I'll know, right? And it's
yeah,
one of my favorite quotes is like, the best spiritual teaching will wear you out the fastest so that you drop all
right.
concepts and then you finally see it because it's not forward. It's we're always running in the wrong direction looking for it,
Yeah,
and it's a
yeah,
backward step, right? It's not out
yeah.
there. It's
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 like a
it's
it's like a trust
it's
fall
looking through
instead
your
of a
eyes
hike.
right now. It's what's noticing. Like that's the crazy part. And
Yeah,
so it's like our mind can't conceptualize it. It can't be found in
yeah,
books. It can't be found in concepts. Those things can point a general direction. They can say it's like Adyashanti is one of my favorite Zen teachers. He's like my whole job is to fail well
hmm,
because I will never say the truth. It just doesn't.
right.
It's not possible to can everything that is to can divine spirit into words. It's
Yeah,
literally it does it's backwards because those words are limited within what it is.
hmm.
Right? Those are just
It's almost like
expressions
it's all
inside of like right.
it's all little breadcrumbs, and then you just follow the breadcrumbs, and you're like, oh my God, we're actually not going anywhere, but we're just walking, we're just
Right.
listening,
Right.
and I've had my own blockages with and coached a lot of people with their own blockages of like, well, I have this offering, I have this medicine for the world, but it's not perfect or it's not complete. It's like the irony of I teach a course called truth training. It should be followed by an 8-week course called listening training,
Yeah.
and it's not.
There you go. There's your next
But
course. There it is. Seriously though.
everything, I know, but everything is incomplete, right? And that gets to still be like, yeah, the many faces of God still, oh God, I can feel like, I've been so emotional lately, and that's one of the ways that God speaks to me is like through my feeling body. And sometimes I wish it wasn't so, but it is. But just like the ache, like the deeply sincere terror and ache that humans have to know what life is and where it comes from. And I see this profound sincerity in people that ironically freezes them from being able to soften and let it be, significantly less miraculous and less shiny and less glorious than maybe a lot of our mythology has told us that it could be, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think part of this work, the 10,000 things that even this conversation is pointing towards, is also like, I have a one-liner like I want healing to be less sexy. I think there's been like through modern and ancient mythology and religion and Instagram influencers, like awakening is this like beautiful, sexy, Shakti Kundalini thing. And I'm like, no, it's
No,
not.
it's. I mean,
No, it's
that's
not.
that's that's
Don't
that's
lie
a
to
part
people.
of it, but it's not. That's not. That's the sales pitch, right? That's what
Yeah.
like sucks you in, but really, it's fucking like it's internal warfare. Like, it's like,
It's internal
yeah, it
warfare,
is like
and it's
it's
like,
rough.
and it's simple.
Yeah.
And it can be so simple. And it's not, I mean, this isn't always true, but this is what feels true right now, right? But it feels like there's this underpinning, it going back to what we're talking about with personal empowerment, like we still want it all to be exciting. And it's like, well, ha ha ha, what if God's always been here and you are the facet of that and there's nothing exciting about it other than just accepting the reality of what is.
Yeah.
But like still you still have to chop wood, carry water, you still have to learn how to advocate for your needs without buckling underneath fear. You still have to live in capitalism. You still have to feed the cat. You
Yeah.
still have to, make sure that your vitamins and minerals are balanced in your body.
Yeah.
It's like it's it's a place.
Chop water or chop wood, carry water.
Stop water, carry wood.
Yeah,
That's
chop water, carry wood.
it. Totally. And there's a simplicity to it, but then, there, but life does have like that extra sparkle of um, depth and meaning. At least like that's my understanding of I can feel less alone in my intrapersonal experience.
Mhm.
And there's moments where my connection to spirit can pull me out of like the looping of everything, all the looping that can happen in our little human experience. And the nature of synchronicity. And no one's perfect, right? But I can more and more and more know what I want. My prayer is clear, and I just wait. So okay,
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how that manifests. I'm excited to see when that manifests. Like
Right.
I've had prayers take 3, 4, 5 years to come
Right.
to be, and it's not this immediate party where it's like, oh my God, my manifestation powers have been so on brand lately. And I can manifest $60,000 in 1 month being a truth coach. And you can too. Can't handle it,
Yeah,
Cole.
it's nonsense. It is. It's not the truth. Well, and that's why people put it
Yeah.
out there like that because that's what attracts the ego. And which, you know,
Because it's speaking to the
right.
scarcity
Well,
and the
because the
boredom.
ego is like, ooh, magic, sparkly,
Yeah.
cool stuff, like pleasure.
We're just
Right.
chickens. We're like, shiny
You know what though?
object.
That is, I mean, I understand. So I've had teachers in the past who that's what they use as bait, right? But then when you get in their
Mhm.
actual program, they're like, "Oh, that's not what it is at all." Like that's like a byproduct, but
Yeah.
that's not. We're about to do some serious work, so you probably don't know what you're in for, but
Yeah.
like that's to be like that's it at least gets people in the door, and that's part of
Yeah.
marketing, that's part of psychology, fundamentally. But what else was I going to say? Um, yeah, it's not like there's so much a big part of this process. I mean, at the end, they're actually, from my experience, like not that I'm at the end, but I've come a long way. Like I've been at this shit for like 20 years, and so in one form or another, and so as you unlayer, as a person unlayers this stuff and unpacks this stuff, which is hard, it's fucking heavy. Like because there's a momentum to the ego, and that's just a process of like removing yourself from the coils of that old shell. And it's challenging. It's difficult. It's not for the faint of heart. Let's just put it that way. And that's why
Mhm.
most people never look at it. That's why most people would rather just live
Yeah.
as, I can't remember who said it, but lives of quiet desperation,
Yeah.
because they think it's easier. It's easier to live in kind of just a prolonged, background, mild to medium, sometimes heavy suffering for the rest of your life. To them, that's the mindset. Than it is to just fucking pull the band-aid off and like really suffer hard but remove it and get through it.
On
Right?
that note, I will say
Yeah.
that I have had to look at my own assumptions of the awakening process and like want that for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then like my brother's a great example of he works and makes a lot of money in corporate America doing something that I strongly disagree with. And he loves it and he's happy. And we can have these conversations, but like when I can get outside of my desire for him, my own selfish desire for him, I'm like, who the hell am I to say he's not exactly what he needs to be doing in this lifetime?
Of course he is, or else he wouldn't be doing it.
And it's like totally. But like the way that people can build these lives around them, and it's for some people the lives that I could look and have my own projections on and be like, ugh, that can't be real for you. And then I'm like, well, maybe it is. And other
Yeah.
people, I can look at their beautiful lives and be like, that must be amazing. And they're like, it's a lie. And you're like, okay, so there's no clear way to know. And that's why, like, for example, in truth training, nobody, nobody can tell what another person's truth is because they have to know. And, ultimately just like, yeah, there's skills, there's years, there's teachers that can influence you and populate you and give you ideas and terms and tools to kind of like explore your human experience better. But at the end of the day, you're the only person that has to live with yourself. And you have to feel those subtle pulls and those subtle anxieties and those subtle ways that you're like, ugh, I don't want this. And, another thing on that note where like, kind of going back to like it being a process of breadcrumb trails, there's maybe like a little inkling of truth that's like, I don't want this relationship. Does that, once again, like how the mind's like, okay, let's end the relationship. It's like, whoa, maybe this feeling, this truth of I don't want the relationship, if I let that live in my field and surrender to it, like you've talked about so much, maybe that shows the next layer of truth that's like, oh, I'm unsatisfied sexually. Oh my God, how am I in relationship to my sexuality? Oh, have I projected that onto, and it can just, the truth becomes like a river instead of a destination.
Right.
And that's maybe where like the
That's
synchronicity
exactly
comes in.
that's exactly the shift.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah. And that's
destination.
when
The destination
synchronicity
is
can
what's
come.
is the river.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right.
had this quote come in the other day and I love it a lot. It goes like this. I never quote myself when practicing. I can't miss the boat because I'm the river.
Yes, 100%. Well, and that's ultimately right the fundamental realization. Like you said about your brother, like when we try and
Yeah.
change people or we're like, oh, this person shouldn't be doing it. That's our own shit. That's our work,
Yeah.
right? And the fundamental realization is everything is exactly as it should be. And
Yeah.
the reason I do this work and the reason, is because it needs an outlet. It wants to happen. And whoever's attracted to that is attracted to it. And whoever's not, that's fine too. It's not for them,
Right.
right? And it's just it's not their time. Or it's not, maybe they'll hear it
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be, a nothing to them and then maybe 10 years down the road some big, explosive awakening will happen. And they'll be, oh, that's what that guy was talking about 10 years ago. Right. So like it's life works in its own time. And it's just, and your brother, like, for
Yeah.
example, your brother's doing exactly what he should be doing or else he wouldn't be doing it. It
Right.
wouldn't have like, if he's happy doing that and that's what it is, then that's fine. You know what I mean? Like now, if he were to come to you and be
I
like,
mean, also on,
hey, I'm having these experiences. I want to dig deep. I want to do great, but there's no more bigger waste of time
right.
for any coach than to try to influence somebody and convince somebody that's unwilling. That's like literally the antithesis of coaching.
Totally.
Like I shouldn't have to
Yeah. It's a
convince you.
drain.
Like you need to come to me ready. There needs to be a
Yeah.
certain level of readiness, and
Right.
I can tell if people are ready or not by as one of my favorite teachers says, he's like, I can tell people are ready by when I ask them certain questions, the way they look at me, the way their responses are.
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, and if they aren't ready, it's not bad. It's not wrong that they're not ready. It's
No.
just they're
Well, I think
gonna
there
have to
can be
suffer
so
for
much.
longer. That's like it's just gonna be painful for them.
Yeah.
It's not good or bad or right or wrong.
Right.
It's just
And
what this way
and we're
causes
so
problems
uncomfortable
and
with
causes
pain.
pain, and this other direction causes much less of that. That's the truth,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. It's like you get to choose the turbulent or the smooth path, but the path is the path, and the destination is the destination. And even like in terms of like my own existential pressure to reach some state of something or other this lifetime, there's been times where I'm just like, what? I'm going to do what I can and learn what I can. And man, I also need to have a good time. And my life isn't just about awakening, it's also about like being this human mess of ego and opinion and bitchiness and comedy. It's like one of my dearest friends, she just turned 50. And she's like, you know what? The last 20 years I've spent clearing my ancestral line and karma. She's like, I'm going to spend the next 20 years having a good time. And I'm like, yes, that feels nice.
Yeah.
Right. And like, and not everybody, but there can be like the shadow side of the self help industry or something, this like never good enoughness, can't get off the hamster wheel, where this is why I love truth training so much, is because it's not a modality that promises something. It's just like, let's get better at you understanding yourself. And then you can do whatever you want with that.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want with that. But yeah, it can be disheartening to see not only like the industrialization and the commodification of help, right? Like these gurus in the East, they were cared for by their communities. And the fact that wisdom teachers, gurus, spiritual teachers as a job here in the West is tricky, because then we have to implement the tactics of capitalism to do something that has never really before lived in capitalism. And I find that tension strange and yet willing to go, because the other options aren't that interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure all that was really good. I can't understand a word you're saying though.
You
but
can't
it will
understand
but it
any
will
of it.
but it will show up fine on the recording. So literally
That's
it's like so
crazy.
choppy right now. So I think that's probably,
Okay, well, we don't have to keep talking for
yeah,
very
we're
long.
over an hour, so let's go ahead
We
and
can
just
wrap it up.
like end it on that note. That was, I know it was epic because how much emotion and like how much emotion and how much conviction you had when you were saying it. So I'll listen to it later once I
Okay, so
hit
here's
record.
this. Long story short, spirituality in like capitalism is weird and real. So come to my truth training and have these conversations with me, because it's the thing that I'm selling.
Okay. I still can't understand what you're saying, but the audience will hear it. The audience will
Oh
hear it. So to end, where can people find you? How do they sign up for truth training? What let's just give us a rundown of however you want to lay that out.
no. They can find me being a hermit in my little cottage out here in Oregon. Truth training begins on January 25th on the Leo full moon, which feels really appropriate for courage and bravery and the willingness to be seen. And it's the last round of truth training. I've done it 5 times now, and it's amazing. And everything has a lifespan. And so I'm really putting my whole heart into this last round of truth training. So I'd love if people want to come and join. It's also amazing because you're doing it with other people. And because there is this pervading fear of others, it's really important that we learn how to embody our truth and learn these skills with other human beings. It's just really normalizing to our experiences. And yeah, I also take one-on-one clients, and I also take friends, and I'm just a pretty average sassy little human that knows that Cole can't hear me right now.
I
So
can't at all. It's okay. It's totally fine. We got most of the conversation in, so can't wait to hear what you said. But
can't
yeah,
wait.
it's gonna be great. So all right, cool. So that concludes this episode, and thanks for coming on.